Yeah, Mr. Tushar, you there?
Yeah, hi Hardik, how are you?
Yep, all fine. I can see
I
you.
believe Hardik, my screen is shared now, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, it's coming.
So hi guys, just as an introduction, I am Tushar Sehgal. I am an ACCA with almost 2 years of post-qualification experience. Talking further about my qualification, I'm also BCom Honors graduate from Sri Venkateswara College, University of Delhi. And talking about my experience, I have worked with KPMG and currently I'm working with BDO in UK offshoring. So today we are going to discuss about one of the most underrated topic of auditing, which is documentation. Documentation is just basic hygiene when preparing work papers. We all have auditing skills, so we need to understand that in order to showcase that, we also need the documentation skills. So in this training, we will be focusing on documentation of workbooks while performing substantive testing procedures. So like since you all have studied audit, so can anyone like participate and discuss what is substantive testing procedures?
Yeah, so I feel substantive testing, as per my knowledge, is a part of test of details where we conduct the verification and vouching, like in the mid-size firms, how we do it, as we do it under the verification and intricate vouching of the uh, audit supports and the further processes post that come under the substantive testing.
Right. Anyone else also want to speak?
Also,
Because yeah, please.
there are a lot of procedures performed to detect the misstatements. So those misstatements, which are at a very huge variance, they can be reported in the final report.
Right. Material misstatements.
The substantive procedures were the procedures used to verify the assessments made by the entity.
Right. So obviously, like everyone has its different understanding, but the meaning should be right, and that's what you all say. So basically, these are the activities performed by the auditor to detect any material misstatements or frauds. So when an audit company claims that the financial records are accurate, complete, and valid, substantive testing supports this claim as evidence that there are no errors. Hence, the documentation of these work papers, the substantive testing procedures is very important. So giving one more minute to why it's important, you can see the points on the screen. So the first is that the foremost reason is that it acts as an evidence if there is any negligence is filed, because it acts as a proof that the audit was planned and hence chances of negligence are minimum. That's why documentation is a highly demanded skill, and this was just from the legal side. If we talk about its benefit to the preparer and to your team as well, you can see the point third, which says that it saves time for the reviewer, leading to good impression and better feedbacks. Obviously, when you prepare something, you get a feedback from the senior for that, right? So you can always mention a point regarding your documentation in the feedback review form. And when the documentation is good, you definitely get a good point for that, because audit is just about two things. First is your technical knowledge and second is documenting it, right? And the last point you can see, which is better understanding of work performed to other people, right? So if I give you an example, suppose you're starting a testing of bank balance, a simple testing. So what you will do here, you will first go to the audit planning document and see like what has been discussed for that during the planning stage, right? And then what you will do, you'll go to the previous year testing and refer to the previous year work paper to see like how it was being documented in previous year and what all tests were performed and what all PVCs were requested, right? So if all the things in the work paper are properly mentioned and properly documented, then it will help you save a lot of time, as it will give you much more clarity on what you have to do, rather than like approaching different people to understand how you should proceed, right? So now we'll start with the basic elements of working paper. I mentioned them as basic elements because these are the first things that you update during the work paper. So this is divided into two parts. First is elements of working paper and second is key documentation points. We'll first discuss them as the pointers, and then I have like examples for you, and then I'll show you each of them how you will actually document these points, right? So I'll not cover all of them separately, but I'll merge those that are interrelated. So the first is the name of the client and period covered by the audit. This is just basic thing when you are auditing a client. So you just mention their name and the period covered by the audit. The next is indexing. Just like in books, indexes are important. Similarly, in work papers, indexes are also important because workbooks have different and multiple tabs. So index help you to actually understand like where you have to directly approach and what is being tested where. The next is mentioning about the initials, which are your name and signature, and the date of preparation and review was completed. And the next is the materiality figures. So like we discussed earlier, like the main reason of performing audit is to find any material misstatements or frauds. So we calculate materiality, and any variance is being reconciled or agreed that this is less than our materiality or not. So that is why it is important to mention materiality in every tab of the Excel. Then there is lead sheet, which is prepared as per trial balance or draft financial statement. So I'll show you how to document a lead sheet going forward, and then moving forward to procedures performed, objective, and conclusion. Again, these are just like basic documentation because you have to mention this, and every firm mentions these when you are performing the substantive testing. So I'll show you again moving forward like how you can document this. So anyone have any question as of now?
So why work papers are so important to share as per you? And we also prepare work papers in mid-size CA firm as well. So how it is different,
Right.
like, if you see like overview.
So work papers are basically important because in audit, most the numbers are being tested here. So financial statement is divided into two parts. First is the front-end testing, which is like where the company mentioned it's all its policies and information about their directors, like anything. And second part is the numbers, which is the main financial on the basis of which we actually take decisions whether we have to purchase the stock of the company or not, and like whatever financial decision we have to take. So all these numbers are being tested in the work paper. So that is why it is important to have a very good documentation of that. And as discussed above as well, in case any negligence is found or in case like the company is being caught in any fraud, so these are our basic evidence that we have performed the testing with the data that client has provided to us. If the documentation would not be clear, just like for example, you didn't mention the year and date or just like name of the client, so you don't have any proof of why of that this is that this testing is performed for this specific client, right? So that is why we need to document these work papers very carefully and need to ensure that all of these things are being prepared with carefulness.
Yeah.
I hope this clarifies your question, Hardik.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Rishab.
Yeah, Rishab.
The basic importance which I think that is of the working papers is that if after years, 1 or 2 years, if any sort of queries arise in the client's data or anything, so that we can easily identify from those. The basic past, it acts as a past evidence for us. Basically, we can say. So they are
Exactly.
much important for our as an audit while doing the audits.
Exactly. Like I said, like usually in most cases, when any negligence is filed, like if a company is being caught into fraud or any of this thing, then these work papers that we performed, that we prepared, act as an evidence that yes, the audit was being planned, everything was done properly. It was just that client hid this information from us.
Yes, it's a must requirement, and if it is not be there, then how can we show others that the such negligence have been found by us while doing the audit? So it is mm, that's why the audit documentation essay which has been come. So it is must for us to do the documentation of those working papers which have been found by us during the course of audit.
Right.
Yes,
So
yes.
documenting the work papers itself is important, but what we are documenting inside the work paper while performing the testing is also as important as it is. Because like I mentioned, if you will not mention the name of the client on the work paper, then you don't have any proof that you have performed the testing for that specific client only.
Yes, yes, reason must also be provided while doing the documenting that query.
Right. So okay, let's just move forward to the key documentation points.
Yes,
So
yes, please.
basically, these are the points that I have been following since like the first day of my job. Like when I added these points as the key mantra to me, because these points will actually help you documenting all the things that you want to. So starting with the first point, which is the elements of work paper. So these are basically those that we discussed above, because like those are essential part of the work paper and like can be part of the legal perspective as well, because it is very important to specifically mention those things. The second one is link amounts to IPEs, which is information provided by the entity. The third one is clearly state any findings that you found during the testing. So we were at the fourth point, which is IPE schedule completeness testing. So I'll show you an example of this moving forward. The next is supporting documents reference. It is as important, like where you have stored the supporting document, you need to add a reference for that. Next is comments in case of any variances. Like Rishab said, we need to add reasons if we find any discrepancies or any variances. The next is just like basics, alignment, font size, font color, and things related to this. We all take care of this even now. The next is use filters rather than removing data. It is a very important point. I'll ask someone from you to actually take up this, and then I'll discuss this further. The next is document all supporting documents. So the fifth was about giving the reference, and the ninth point is about like documenting all the supporting documents, whether these are invoices or any schedule or anything. We need to document all of those either in the work paper or in the software that we are using. The next point is mention date and client contact name from whom the IPs were received. IPs are again information provided by the entity. So it is important to mention the client contact name, because in case your work is being reviewed and manager find any query or anything, he knows the contact name and they can directly approach him rather than messaging or emailing you to actually approach that person and ask for this query or anything else. The next point is highlighting unfinished tasks. And 12th point is add comments on unfinished tasks. Again, these 2 points are interlinked. I'll show you how to do this moving forward. It's just like whenever we start preparing a work paper, there are multiple supporting documents that we haven't received yet. So in that case, we highlight those unfinished tasks or unfinished area, and then we can add a comment onto that why it is incomplete. For example, if the supporting document isn't received but it has been requested, so you can simply add a comment to that highlighted part that this has been requested from the client but not yet received. With that, if you go to any leave or anything and any other preparer takes this up, then he knows that this has been requested, so he can follow up on that. The next is clearly include PBCs or IPEs used. So this is just simple, like for example, you are using a receivable schedule for receivables testing. So you can mention at the top that this is a receivable schedule. It might not help you today, but if any, but in the future years, when some other preparer will be taking this up, then they will find it easy to understand that this IP was used, and they can request it directly rather than like going to the client and asking for multiple documents. The next is use headings. We all know this point, like without headings, we cannot proceed. The next is use audit key. Again, audit key is a separate form of documentation that can be used. I'll also show you an example of this moving forward. The next is mention currency in amount. Like this is a mandatory thing that you should do, because in most of the cases, companies are dealing in different countries of the world. So the local currency might be different from the reporting currency. So you need to mention their local currency, then convert it into reporting currency, because like that's how it is being shown in the financial statement. The next point is use formulas, not hard-coded figures. So for example, if we are comparing the current year figures with the previous year figures. So rather than just adding a variance as the amount, we should use a formula. And because this, while reviewing, it actually helps the manager to understand that what is being subtracted, rather than like it creates a question in the mind of the reviewer that what is being subtracted and why it has been done so. The next is always mention year dates. Like discussed above, it is important to mention the year and dates in the work paper, because then you have a proof that yes, this has been tested for the current year only. And the last one is sign of the workbooks. Signing of the workbook is like a basic etiquette of auditing, because it gives the update on the work as well as as soon as the work is completed, it is being signed off, then it clarifies the reviewer or the manager that this has been completed and ready for the review.
Is it any particular industry related point, or these are the basic general points which can be followed with any industry, right?
Like I am specifically into funds right now, but these I have specifically taken the general
What-
points. Like they are not specifically related to any funds, leases, or any testing. Like you can use them in all the industries. I haven't taken any industry specific points here.
Hedge funds point you are saying this.
No, like any industry, like it doesn't matter whether it funds, leases, or anything. These are just the common points of documenting your work. It's not like you're going to use this specifically in funds or in leases or like in revenue. No.
Can you please tell about that IP schedule complete testing? Like I just did not get
Yeah,
that
I'll show
before.
you this in the example. Like I have this in the example, and that will clarify your point as well.
Okay, thank you.
So these are generic points.
Yes, general
Not all
points.
Big Four will be following it. Some of them they will be following. Some of the Big Fours might be, mentioning it in a different way. Maybe manufacturing, service trading. He is mentioning private equity, venture capital audits. All of them. These generic points are there because, as someone highlighted in the comments also, it is something to satisfy SA 230's requirement and creating past evidences of the documentation and making it really easy for the reviewer. So any layman can also get into the work paper and recalculate or dig out with the same conclusion which we did. That's it. And there was one doubt, Tushar. IP,
Yeah.
I think that's all right.
Sorry.
Information produced by entity, and they've got, it's nothing but PBC provided by
Right.
client data given by the company.
Right. IP can include any PBC or like the schedules that we specifically use while testing, because those schedules actually give us the number that we can reconcile to trial balance.
Cool.
So guys, can anyone take up this point 8 and can give an idea what it is, like use of filters rather than removing data?
Hello.
Yeah, Gaurav.
Yeah.
You're audible.
In point number 8.
Yes,
Yeah.
use filters rather than removing data.
Yeah, in Excel sheet you can create the filter, but exactly I don't know the same. But yeah, you're using the in Excel sheet you can create the filter view.
Right.
And select the like, a particular any item that you needed.
Right.
Okay.
Good try. Yeah, Shiraz, you can give it a try.
Yeah, sure. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah.
Okay. Generally, when we start for a substantive testing, we took the IP or PPC from the client, and in other tab, we test the samples which he had selected from that IP. So what we generally did, we create a filter on that samples which he had selected for the testing, so that we can have the entire amount of IP, and we also have a prima facie on the tab that the samples which we have selected. That's the use which we can do with regard to filters.
Right, perfect. I was also going to give you an example with the sample itself. So I'll just tell you, like I was reviewing someone's work and I saw this, like that was quite shocking for me, that like you said, he took the samples using the sample calculator, and then what he did, rather than adding the complete PBC to the workbook, he just removed the remaining data and copied only the samples to the workbook. So that's not how you're going to do this. Rather than removing any IP, because you should not ever like do any changes to the IP, because again, like for the legal perspective, you will show if any negligence is filed, then you can't show that we have used this IP, because you have already removed the data and you have edited their data. So rather than doing that, you can highlight the samples and then simply use a filter to get that at the top. Right. A simple formula of you getting a filter is Control-Shift-L. So you can get filters using that. I hope that is clear. And any other question? So no issues. Let's move forward. If you have any question in your mind, then those examples will actually cover all these points, so we'll make things a bit more clear. So moving forward, I will be covering documentation of some FS areas, which includes lead sheet, bank testing, cash and end testing, property, plant and equipment, test of details, and payroll. So starting with the lead sheet, like you can see on the screen, on the right, you can see I have added like what pointers I have used here. So at the top and in the first box, you can see it's the
Tushar,
firm name.
sorry to interrupt. You would be sharing this slide with us, right? So I can share it with
Yes.
everyone. So in
Yes,
case
that is
people
why I
are
haven't taken any number or anything, so as to there is no
Sure.
issues.
confidentiality. Okay, so in
Right.
case people are not able to read it all, just maybe hear it out and try to grasp the concept what he's trying to say. Don't have too much of burden on your eyes.
Right. We'll share this because like this is like a guru mantra for everyone. Like if you take care of these points, then apart from testing, their documentation is completely done. They don't need to add anything to this. Like they can add if anything specifically their manager sees or something, but these are the most of the points I have covered here, that for which I have got any review note, or for like I see what is essential while you're documenting.
Wonderful.
Right. So starting with the lead sheet, at the top, you can see I have mentioned the firm name here. Then this box is about the client details. In front of the client, you can enter the client name. In front of unit, it is basically like when you are auditing a subsidiary, then you can add the subsidiary's name in front of the client name, and in front of unit, you can add the parent company's name. And then in the year end, you'll end the year end date. The next is regarding the materiality figures, which is materiality, performance materiality, tolerable error, or like any variance, or like what we call clearly trivial issues. And in the end, this is like completed by, these are details of who has completed the work paper, the date it was being completed, reviewer details, and the date it was being reviewed. Then moving forward, like I told you, we'll discuss the objective, work performed, and conclusion moving forward. So I'll show you all of these in all the examples that I told you. So starting off with the objective, since this is just a simple lead sheet, so the objective would be simple, to prepare lead sheet for different FS areas. So I mentioned as different FS areas, but if you're doing it for specific area, like for example, bank, so you can simply mention to prepare lead sheet for bank balance, or like for cash in hand, whatever it is. And then it is work performed. Work performed basically shows like what procedures you have performed. So it is like essential part of the workbook. So that is why this all is part of the basic documentation, because whatever the firm is, whether it's a mid-sized firm or big four or big six, big seven, whatever it is, they all will mention these things specifically. Like, and in some cases where there are some firms have standard work papers, like you can simply download and you'll get a format of that. They also have these parts specifically. Moving forward to the lead schedule, at the top you can see we have used headings. The first, you can mention it as description, narrative, whatever it is, where you will mention like whether it's an asset item or penal item, for example, PPE, bank, so you can simply mention that. Then you give the reference of the tab where you will be perform the testing. For example, you have named a tab as PPE testing, so you'll just add the tab reference of that. Then it's about draft numbers. Yeah, then it's about draft numbers, which you will get from the trial balance or the draft financial statement that you have received. Then it's like simply adjustments on any journals. Then you will add the final figures from the year-end FS numbers. Then since it's a lead sheet, so the basic purpose is to compare the current year balance to the previous year numbers. So you'll add the previous year financial statement numbers. Then you'll calculate any movement to find out what is the variance there, and you will give an explanation of that why there is such variance. It is essential to discuss to give a comment on the variance, because sometimes the variance is so huge that it is even above the materiality. So in that case, we need to specifically document the reason for that, because if we talk about, we have enough time for preparation, but the partner who is reviewing or who is doing the final review, they can't go to each PBC or IP to discuss or to see like why there is such variance. So you add this for the convenience of them. And then in the end, it's just a conclusion. So since it's a lead sheet, You can add a conclusion or you might not, it's just your choice. It is not mandatory to add a conclusion in the lead sheet. And as an overview, if we discuss about the documentation here, the top is just the basic documentation. These were in the basic, in the elements of the work paper. Then moving forward, what we did, we compared the current year and previous year figures, which is like a mandatory thing to do in lead sheet. And then we used headings, because without headings, we will not be able to give the reference of like what we are doing and what these things actually represent, right? And then mention dates, like I told you, mentioning date is very important, and you can see where I have mentioned the date under the final figures and previous year FS as well, because it gives a reference that yes, we have compared the current year figures specifically to the previous year only. So here you can add the previous year dates. And further talking about variance comments in lead sheet, like discussed, it is essential to discuss any variance or mention any movement that has taken place. And again, conclusion, it is just basic document as a part of basic documentation. I hope the lead sheet is clear. Then moving forward, we go to bank testing. So again, at the top, you can see just basic documentation, which is firm name, client details, materiality details, and preparer and reviewer details. Then now we have entered like two specific testing things. So the objective is changed. So like since it's a bank testing, so how we can write the objective to ensure bank balance disclosed in financial statement is correct, right? Because that is the basic purpose of doing the audit, that whatever is being disclosed in the financial statement is correct. There is no need to add any complicated jargon or like anything to these basic documentation like conclusion, work performed, and objective. Then moving to work performed, you can see what I have mentioned is agreed bank balance as per trial balance to bank statement and bank confirmation received from banks. I just added as a line to show you, like, I will not call it as a good documentation. Rather, I had like space constraint here, so I added this way. But what you can do instead of this, you can simply add a pointer, obtained bank balance as per TB and bank statement from the client. The second pointer, obtained bank confirmations from banks through email or through confirmation.com, whatever you will use. And in the end, you should add this point as a third point, which is agreed bank balance as per TB to bank statement and bank confirmation received from banks. So that's what we call a good documentation, where you add pointers rather than adding a line. You need to clarify everything from where you have received the data and everything in the work performed or procedures performed. So moving to what we have done in testing here. So you can see we have divided the testing into three parts. The first one is as per TB, which is an IPE, then as per bank statement, which is a bank document, and again as per confirmation, which is again a bank documentation. So at the top, we have used the heading. Then we have used the subheading here, which was the part of the trial balance, bank statement, or confirmations. And then we have performed the testing. Like you can see, we have mentioned the account name under the TB and amount, and specifically the currency. I'll tell you the reason in a minute. And then as per bank statement, we can see they have provided what information do we have in the bank statement? Simply account number and amount, right? And then moving to as per confirmation, again, what information do we have in confirmation? Confirmation received from banks, amount, and the account number, that's it. And in the end, it's just a conclusion that hence on the basis of the procedures performed, bank is correctly disclosed in financial statement. Again, that is just a basic purpose of doing the audit. We have mentioned in the objective that we'll be the objective is to ensure bank balance disclosed is correct, and in the conclusion we are concluding that yes, bank is correctly disclosed in financial statement. So again, these both are interrelated. And now talking about what documentation we have done here. So at the top you can see we have done the basic documentation, which was the part of the elements of work paper. And then talking further, you can see multiple arrows. So the first one is mention the PBC used. So if we go to the arrow, it is TB. So we specifically mentioned that this amount and these description and details have been taken from the TB, right? Next is use headings. We have used headings, both headings and subheadings, right? The third is added reference. So like I mentioned that it is important to document all the supporting documents and IPEs. So this is what we have done here. We have added the reference where we have stored that document so that in case anyone need to refer to that, these documents are easily accessible to them. The next is mentioned currency. Like discussed, currency, most of the companies deals in multiple countries, so their local currency might be different from the reporting currency, right? So what we have done here, we have in the column F, you can see we mentioned amount in currency. Then in column G, we have mentioned the exchange rate. And then in column H, we have again mentioned the amount as per currency. So in the F column, for example, the local currency was USD. So you will mention the amount in USD, then you will use the exchange rate, and then you will again use the formulas to show what is the GBP value, or like what is the reporting currency value. So that's how you will document this. And going down is like highlight incomplete items. The 11th and 12th point that I told were interrelated. This is what I'm covering here. So let's take an example that we received the TB, we received the bank statement, but we didn't receive the confirmations as of now. So we updated the amount as per TB, we updated the amount as per bank statement. But since we haven't received the confirmations yet, so we can't update that. So in that case, what we will do, we'll simply highlight that area and can add a comment that, like discussed, this confirmations have been requested through email, but they aren't received yet. So that's what we call the proper documentation, so that if any person opens this work paper, or like any manager or reviewer opens this work paper, they have this idea that this is pending and will be updated as soon as the client data is received. Going forward, the next comment is link amount, no hard coded figures. So this, I consider this as the most important point. Like in 99% cases, or like in all the companies, the trial balance is received as in Excel forms. So what we do, we usually add the trial balance to the workbook, and then rather than adding the amount in hard coded figure, we add this and link it to trial balance. This can be done like putting the is equal to sign and linking and clicking on the amount as per TB. So this is important because rather than if you will add just hard coded figures, then everyone has to go and find that where is that amount and from where they have taken this. But if you will link it, the amount will be directly approachable, because they can easily find it because it is linked, so they can easily find it where that amount is. So that makes things a bit easier for the reviewer and actually saves a lot of time, because you'll do this like in each of the IP used, so it will surely save some time of the reviewer, and in case you are doing a self-review, it will also help you save a lot of time. Any questions in this?
No, very much clear.
Perfect. Next is cash in hand testing. So again, at the top, it's just like basic documentation, which includes like firm name, client details, materiality details, and preparer and reviewer details. Then moving forward, we have mentioned the objective. Like you can see, the format is totally the same for everything. There is not any change in this documentation. It's just the style of documentation and style of testing of the IP changes, and that is form specific. But I have worked in KPMG and I'm working in video. Like I have seen that usually the headings also remain the same. It's just like they might add one thing or might ask you to remove one thing. That's it. Like there are not much changes in the headings, because in the end, the testing is going to remain the same. It's just that a documentation might be different in every company. So again, the objective is to ensure that cash in hand is correctly disclosed in financial statements. And work performed, since it's like we are testing it with just cash in hand certificates, so you can add as obtain cash in hand certificates and read them to cash in hand as per trial balance. Since it's just we are performing a very small thing here, so you can add it as a one line. But in bank testing, we were doing 3 testings at a time. So obviously you need to add pointers to explain it in a better way. So again, if we go to that specifically to testing, I have divided it into 2 parts. First is as per trial balance, and second is as per audit team. This is as per audit team, shows what audit team has performed here. So as per TB, since it's cash in hand and there can be multiple locations, so at first you add the name of the location and then the amount, right? This is the only IP which we can use. And then moving forward, as per audit team, what we did, we received cash certificates. So for example, if I give you an example of any shop-based company that have their, for example, Lenskart. So in Lenskart, what we do, we usually pay through cash, bank, UPI, credit card. Only these ways are there, right? So for bank and for bank transactions or for credit card transactions, we can receive a statement. But for cash in hand, there is no as a specific statement. So what firms do, they ask for cash certificate. These are basically, it is a form that the store manager, authorized store manager fills, and it includes the details, what amount they have in each currency. If it's an Indian client, then 1 rupee, 10 rupee, 5 rupee coin, 500 rupees note, 2000 rupees note, like this. And they have the numbers in front of it, like how many of notes and coins they have. So what we do on the first, we check whether that cash certificate is authorized. What does authorized mean? That it has been provided by the store manager and is signed by him. We can also say it is a part of control testing, but we also document it here as well, because it is type of checking a control that yes, the store manager is signing this as discussed in the planning stage and it is being authorized. Then we mention the date of certificate. The date of certificate is important because it should be year-end date only. The next is amount per cash certificate. Here we add the amount, because at first we check whether it is being signed or not. Then we added the date. Then we will check the amount, and then we'll simply calculate the variance, that whether it matches to trial balance or not. And if it doesn't, we'll add another column here in H, that the reason for the variance, right? And then moving on to conclusion, again, it is related to objective. We said that objective is to ensure cash in hand is correctly disclosed in FS. So the conclusion will be, on the basis of the testing performed, cash in hand is correctly disclosed. And if we talk about the basic documentation here, at top, like you can see again the basic elements. Then
can you please repeat the last things which you have told? There was some error I missed out on a little.
Conclusion thing.
Yeah, this cash portion.
Okay, I'll hardly take a minute. I'll discuss it again. So as per TB, what we'll take, we take the location of like for what location we are testing it, and then add the amount. And as per audit team, we'll ask for the cash certificate. And then what we'll check, that whether this cash certificate is authorized or not, which means that whether it is signed or not by the relevant person. Then we'll mention the date of certificate, which should be the year-end date, because that's when the balance sheet item is being shown. That's how the balance sheet item is being showed in the financial statement. The next is amount per cash certificate. It is simply like this, like I told you, it will include the number of units of each currency. So at the end, they'll show you what is the total of that, and you will add the total of it in your workbook, because we are testing the numbers in the end. So you'll add that number, and then we'll calculate the variance, which would be calculated by subtracting the amount as per cash certificate to amount as per TB, right? And then we move on to conclusion, which is, hence on the basis of the testing performed, cash in hand is correctly disclosed in financial statement. Again, like I said, it is related to objectives. The objective was to ensure cash in hand is correctly disclosed. And in the conclusion, we concluded that yes, we have performed the testing and it is correctly disclosed. I hope it's clear now. And then moving
the location portion, what does location mean over here? Like the location of the client or location of
like usually cash in hand takes place when the company deals in shops. For example, Lenskart. We have Lenskart in multiple locations, right? Like I live in Faridabad, so I have a store in Faridabad. I used to live in Rohini, so there were multiple stores of it. So we add the location of the store here.
Yeah,
for example, Faridabad, Rohini.
It means the geographical location, right?
Right.
Not location of the.
No, because location of the client is same, like it's the headquarter. But since we are testing the cash in hand for multiple geographical locations, so we'll add the name of that.
Okay, I got it. All the Lenskart locations will be here with their respective 31st December balance.
Right, 31st December, 31st March, whatever the year end is. Right. So if we talk about what documentation we have done here, at the top it's again basic documentation, which includes like firm name, client details, materiality details, and preparer and reviewer details. Then it's objectives. which I mentioned here separately, like mention procedures clearly, but it is a part of basic documentation only. And then if we talk specifically about testing, then again, we have used heading as all other areas. Then we have mentioned the IPE used, which is cash certificate here, because it is mandatory. If it will simply mention, for example, if we take, it was mentioned that amount as per IPE, then you'll not make sure like what it is, and you might ask the client that can you please provide us something related to cash, and they might give you something else, then you ask for something else, so it creates a confusion. But if it is specifically mentioned that this is cash certificate, then things will be easier for me when I'm doing the audit next year, because I know cash certificate was being requested, so I'll just simply add a request that we need cash certificate for all these locations. That's it. Then it show variance wherever comparing amounts. Like I said, we compare our recalculation and our auditing work to what client has provided, so we calculate variance everywhere. Next is give reference of where supporting document is stored. So since this you can store this cash certificate as a snip in the workbook itself or in the work paper, or you can add it in the software also. Like it's totally up to you. This does not affect anything. So, but you need to mention its reference. For example, if you have a specific tab for cash certificate, then simply mention the reference of the tab below the cash certificate, so that it is directly accessible and anyone can easily access these numbers rather than just going through each tab and going through the file to find these. And then, as discussed, use formulas, not hard-coded figures. Like here, we have calculated the variance, which is amount per cash certificate minus amount as per TB. If you have simply added the numbers, then again, it would have been a bit confusion. Not in this case, because just a small testing, but specifically in TODs, it plays a major role. And then it's like link amounts rather than hard-coded amounts. Again, we will add trial balance to the work paper, and then we link the amount to that trial balance. Like said, it is as simple as adding an is equal to sign and then selecting the number that you want. That's it.
One thing I wanted to ask, like cash certificate authorized and cash certificate reference. So the reference one is the certificate provided to us by the company,
right?
But like the certificate authorized is like what, like which we have ordered. Like if, for example, in a small bank, like how we test cashes, we will check their cash book and we'll check it physically that okay, this much amount is here. But like how will you do it here? I have taken the certificate from them, but the supporting document to that certificate will be what? How will
cash certificate itself is a supporting document here, because we are not at the client site and we cannot just sit there every day to see like how much cash are they receiving. So this is a part of, like, this is specifically mentioned during the control testing. So what we do in control while we are testing its control, we take a listing of all the store managers, right? And then, like I mentioned, cash certificate authorized. We see that whether it is being signed by that store manager only or not. If not, then we can raise query with the client. If it is being authorized, then we can simply take it as yes, it is being provided. Because like you mentioned that you checked passbook or cash book, whatever it is, the cases that is related to bank, those are all legal documents that you can take as a proof.
Yeah, that I understood. Like one physical thing is being checked by something written, so it is a reconciliation. Over here, they are providing us, and if it is signed, it is a already understood reconciliated thing, which is tested. If it is signed, so the signing thing is the testing thing. That's something
that it has been signed by the right person, and the amount that is in the cash certificate is same as what is there in the trial balance.
Okay.
So I believe cash in hand is also clear. Next, moving to property, plant and equipment. Again, this is a lead sheet for PPE. So I added as a Hello.
I have a query.
Yeah.
With regard to explanation in the variances.
Yeah.
In lead sheet, we give the explanation only when the variance is over and above materiality.
No, like
over and above PM.
You can give like usually we give comment when it is above materiality, or like it depends on firm to firm. So like when I was in KPMG, they said whether it is being above like clearly trivial, then you can simply add an explanation why. And if it is less than that, then you can simply state that it is less than that. So there is no need to mention any materiality. So this is form specific. Some forms ask you to do it above performance materiality. Some forms ask you to do it in above if the amount is above materiality.
Okay. So there is no hard and fast rule for this.
No hard and fast rule.
Okay. And while doing the testing, over and above SAD would require explanation.
Right. Because SAD is transaction specific. You can also call it SAD, you can call it clearly trivial, your choice.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. So moving to property, no issues. So moving on to property, plant and equipment. So again, at the top, like I told you that we can also use audit key, which is a different type of documentation. So I have used it here for your reference. So you can see I have mentioned an audit key here. So at the top, again, it's just basic documentation, like in all other cases. Then it's objective. Again, the objective would be to create a lead sheet for property, plant and equipment. Work performed, we obtained previous year financial statement, FAR, which is fixed asset register. So I have added that as an audit key. Then we received the final FS and prepared PP lead sheet. Again, you can add a separate point for this, or you can simply, because it's a simple lead sheet and there is no complications here. So you can simply add a single statement. Now moving on to audit key. So why do we use this? Like you can see here, we have added, for example, here, we have added multiple references everywhere, right? But when we use audit key, we can simply, rather than adding these in the headings, you can simply add these audit keys anywhere in the financial statement where you are performing the testing. For example, the first one is DFS, which is agreed to draft financial statement. The next one is LYFS, which is agreed to prior year, agreed to last year financial statement. Then it is FS, which is agreed to final FS. Then TB, we can give its reference, and it's agreed to trial balance. And the end is, since it's a PPE, so the main IPE would be fixed asset register. This fixed asset register is provided by every firm, like they create a listing of this. So we mentioned that wherever the FAR is mentioned, it is fixed asset register. Now moving on to testing and how we have used audit key here. So at first, we have mentioned the item, that whether it's a furniture, computer, like anything, whatever it is. Then we have mentioned the opening balance, that what is the opening balance and from where we can take it, last year financial statements, right? That's how you're gonna reconcile it. So we mentioned we have taken it from last year financial statement. Then we are going to use the fixed asset register to see what were the additions during the year and what were the disposals during the year. And then we go to closing balance. So again, we can use a formula here, that is opening balance plus any additions or purchases during the year, subtract any disposals or sale of fixed asset during the year. And then we got it, and then we can reconcile it to final FS or trial balance or draft FS, whatever it is. Then usually, rather than depreciating the asset every year, what I have seen firms do, they use accumulated depreciation. So how we're gonna show it? Again, like simply opening balance, which is balance as per last year financial statement, charge for the year, which is like how much depreciation is charged this year, and then closing balance. Again, opening balance minus current year depreciation will give us closing balance, and then we can again reconcile it to trial balance. And in the end, it just net what is the book value. It's just simply closing balance of valuation minus closing balance of accumulated depreciation. And then moving on to conclusion, simply again, it's like that. Hence, on the basis of the procedures, PPE is correctly disclosed. So here, what correctly disclosed means that we have prepared the lead sheet, and as per lead sheet, the lead sheet amounts match to financial statements. And if we simply talk about what documentation we have done here, at the top, it's just basic documentation. Then we used audit key. So you can see, rather than adding any reference below the headings, we have simply added an audit key short forms here, that is LYFS, which is last year financial statement, fixed asset register for additions, fixed asset register for disposals, and then closing balance is being agreed to TB or DFS. Otherwise, what we have to do, we have to give reference of each in the heading. So sometimes you can do this, you can do, there is no hard and fast rule what you have to follow. It's totally your choice. It's just an alternative way of documentation. Then moving on to next, again, we use the headings here, which is again mandatory. Then we used formula rather than hard-coded figures. So again, what we did, we calculated the closing balance using the formula, we calculated net book values using the formula, and we calculated the closing balance of valuation or cost as per formulas. So this will make things easy for him, that what we, if we will simply add, for example, in terms of cost or valuation, what we will do, if we'll add a simply hard-coded figure, yes, this is 10,000. So what your reviewer or manager will have to do, he'll have to take a calculator, he'll have to add the opening balance, then add additions to it, and then subtract disposals to it, right? But what here we will do, he can simply refer to the formula what we have used and then like agree to it, and then if it's fine, then he'll just simply move forward. So there is no need for him to use any calculator or anything. Then what is this? Added reference as per audit key. So what we did, we gave reference to each as per audit key, like what we have used here. And next, we mentioned the PBC used, which is fixed asset register in this case. Your client might call it a different thing, but it is a fixed asset register that is being used in case of VPE. No other register is being provided, or no other proof is being provided of the transactions of fixed assets or PPE. And in the end, it's again just basic documentation, which is conclusion. So any question regarding this?
In this depreciation, accumulated depreciation column, can we insert percentage also?
Like what is the percentage of depreciation? Yeah, like you have a choice, but like in the second tab, you can see I have, when I'm recalculating that depreciation, I have mentioned the heading depreciation rate as per client policy.
Okay, okay.
So rather than mentioning it in the lead sheet, you can mention it in the, while you're performing the testing as well. Because the main purpose of lead sheet is to give the reference that yes, trial balance matches to the financial statement provided.
Okay.
Right. So I hope it's clear now. Like you can mention, it's totally your choice.
Yeah. Thank you.
So moving forward to PPE part 2, which is where we are checking, recalculating the depreciation. So again, at the top, it's just basic documentation. Moving forward, objective. What our objective is to ensure depreciation is correctly calculated and disclosed in financial statement, correctly disclosed in financial statement. This is like main purpose of audit, that it is correctly disclosed. Then procedures form. This is what I call a good documentation pointers. What we did, what procedures we will perform. So like you can see, we can either mention it as work performed or we can mention it as procedures performed. Totally your choice. So what we mentioned as first point, verify arithmetical accuracy of depreciation charge by recalculating depreciation. So what we mentioned that we will be recalculating depreciation here. Second, check depreciation rates by reconciling it to signed policy. Right? We mentioned about the policy here. And then third, reconciling depreciation charge as per trial balance, fixed asset register, and audit team calculation. And if you go to testing now, at first we mentioned what the asset is, then its cost, then what is its accumulated depreciation as per fixed asset register, then what is the depreciation rate as per policy. We can add a snip of this depreciation of this policy in the workbook, or we can simply add as a separate file. Then what it is as per TB, and then what is it is as per fixed asset register. Now what we will do, we'll do a recalculation. So what would be the recalculation here? Cost minus accumulated depreciation into the percentage of depreciation as per their policy. We recalculated it, and then we can simply calculate the variance. If the variance is below clearly trivial or is 0, then we don't need to do anything. But if it is above CT, then we have to query this from the client that why there is any changes, or like why there is such a huge difference. And then it's just a simple conclusion. Hence, based on the testing performed, PPE is correctly depreciation and correctly disclosed. Again, conclusion and objective are interrelated.
Yeah.
So what basic documentation we did here is added basic documentation, which is like we are doing everywhere, mentioned procedures clearly. So this is what we call a good documentation of procedures, because we clearly mentioned everything what we are going to do here. Then we use headings. Then depreciation policy, we mentioned that we added a snip of depreciation policy in workbook or documented it in the software. Totally your choice. You can do it anyway. Then added FAR in workbook and link amounts. So again, fixed asset register, since it includes transactions, so it is in the Excel form. So again, you can add it in the Excel and you can link these cost, accumulated depreciation and per client details to that fixed asset register. Because with that, they can simply use the formula and can go directly from where you have taken the amount, rather than just going to the IP and searching each transaction, like from where you have taken these amounts. And then it's like use formula for calculating the variances and for recalculation. Like rather than doing it, the recalculation in the calculator, show a complete formula, because in Excel you can do every calculation. There is no complication in that. Then again, link to audit key. Since we used audit key to represent PPE, so we use the same audit key here rather than giving some different references. Then mention the IPE, what the data is, which is again fixed asset register. We mentioned that we have used FAR for here and used FAR IPE for these two amounts as well. And again, in the end, it's conclusion, which is again just basic documentation. So you must be thinking that we have checked the depreciation here, but what about the additions and disposals? So like someone in the starting mentioned that substantive testing includes test of details. So that's what we are going to see how we will document it. So for what we usually do test of details, you can see here for additions or disposals of property, plant and equipment, for any expenses, receivables, payables, revenue, and for whatever schedule you receive, we usually perform test of details for that. What is test of details? Where we reconcile the IPs to the supporting documents on sample basis, which is in 95% cases, these are the invoices. So if we see at the top, it's just basic documentation again, then objective to ensure completeness and existence of whatever the FS area is. Like if you are doing for additions of property, plant and equipment, then the objective would be to ensure completeness and existence of PPE additions. Okay, then work performed. What we did, we obtained the client schedule, selected samples and agreed them to relevant supporting documents. Again, rather than adding it in a single line, you could have used points, even I would have, but since I had space constraint because I have to prepare an Excel, then add a snip of it here. So that's why I did it in a single line. But obviously pointers makes things much more easier to understand. Then moving on to what testing we did. The first is as per IPE, like which you will give a reference for which I have mentioned the schedule used. What schedule we are using here. If it's additions or disposals, then we will be using FAR. If it's expenses, receivables, payables, then it will be expense schedule, receivable schedule, payable schedule. And if it's revenue, then it will be a complete revenue listing of what all revenue that they have earned during the year and whether it is accrued or not. All these things will be mentioned there. So from that schedule, we'll take this IPE, which will include the transaction detail. Obviously, in any of this case, transaction details will be mentioned. Then category, whether it's additions, disposals, expenses, receivables, payables, revenue, whatever it is. Description. For example, if a computer is purchased, so you can simply mention the description as per IP, computer purchased, and then it's amount. So this is just what we have taken from IP. There is no complications here. But what we audit team do, we prepare this part here, this all, which is as per invoice. So once we are done choosing with the samples, so again, choosing sample is based on sample calculator. And again, all the firms have their own sample calculators. So I cannot show it to you because it is video specific, but all firms have their own software for that or own Excel file or whatever they use. So in terms of documentation, what we do, firstly, invoice number that we will find in the invoice only. Then invoice date, because invoice date either should match the transaction date, or if invoice is raised on some other date, then it's fine. Then description, which should be same as what is mentioned in the schedule provided. Then amount, again, we have mentioned currency. If the transaction has taken place in some different currency, then we can simply mention the currency here. For example, if it is taking place in US dollar, then we can simply mention USD here. Then further exchange rate, we'll give a reference from where we are taking this exchange rate. In video, they update this exchange rate on the daily basis. So we take it from the video audit methodology. But in different forms, you may take it from the Google or from a specific website. So you can add a reference to that. And then again, using the formula, you'll calculate the amount in the reporting currency. So how it will be calculated? Local currency multiply or divided by exchange rate. And then we'll calculate the variance. What this variance is? This variance is amount as per invoice, which is column K, subtracted by amount as per the IP provided. So again, we have calculated the variance. If there is any variance, then we'll add a column here, which is explanation of variance. And if not, we can simply mention whether it's agreed or not. If agreed, you can simply mention yes, or if not, you can simply mention no. And like someone asked me about the IP schedule completeness testing, right? So this is what I have shown here. It's just simple what we do. So basically, its reason is to ensure that the IP provided, for example, any schedule provided, is complete. So what we do, we simply do it in 3 rows. The first is total of schedule, which is like the total amount provided, total amount in the schedule. We see what is the total of what is its amount as per trial balance. We add it, and then we calculate it. If there is no variance, then IP schedule is complete, and they haven't hidden any information as of now. But if there is any variance, then again we'll go back to the client and ask why there is such variance, and whether they need to update the financial statement accordingly, or whether they need to update their IP schedule, or if they haven't provided us any latest schedule, they will provide us with the latest schedule. So this is just IP schedule completeness testing, and there is, I believe, it's not at all complicated. Moving on to conclusion, it is hence based on the testing performed, it can be concluded that the given area of FS is complete or exists. So I have mentioned it as given area of FS because TODs can be used for any of such cases, but you can simply mention hence based on the testing performed, it can be concluded that additions, disposal expenses are incomplete, or if you're checking the existence, they exist. So what documentation we have done here at the top is just basic documentation. Then what we did, mention the schedule used. Again, like mention the IP used. So since we will be using a schedule here, so I mentioned it as a schedule. Then since it's a TOD, refer to invoice and add these invoices to the software that you're using for audit. Because when you have taken the samples, even the reviewer do it on the sample basis. Like if you have taken 10 samples, then reviewer might take just 2 samples and reconcile it to the invoice that yes, you have added the correct details. So that is why it is important to document those invoices as well in the software. Then mention currency. I have already stated the reason for this. Calculated variance. You all know that we need to calculate the variance between the supporting document and as per schedule, trial balance, whatever it is. And then link to IPE. Since I mentioned that these schedules are provided in the Excel form, so just like all other fixed asset registers and everything, we can link this amount to IPE as well. The next is regarding the completeness testing, what we did. We can link the sum as per schedule to IPE. We can link the amount as per TB to trial balance, and then we can simply use formula. And in the end, again, it's just conclusion, which is basic documentation. So like this documentation, it might seem like it's a bit complicated. You have to like remember a lot of things, but it's not at all complicated. Like I have been doing it for the like more than 2 years now. So now I find it quite easy because I have tested like almost all the FS areas. So now it's like, I know what I have to update and what I have to not. The next, this is the last testing that we are going to discuss, which is payroll testing.
I just have a point. Whether
Yeah.
the schedule and the FAR are the one and same thing now?
No, like, yes, like fixed asset register is the schedule that we receive for property, plant and equipment, because the name itself mentioned that it's a fixed asset register, right? And these schedules are basically like any schedule which is related to any basically like maybe the transactions or anything related to the additions or disposals. So yes, they are in the same thing, but fixed asset register is specifically related to property, plant and equipment and fixed assets. I didn't mention any specific schedule here because I am taking multiple FS areas here for test of details. For example, if you want to know the schedules for additions, you can simply ask for PPE addition schedule or disposal schedule. For expenses, you can ask for expenses transaction listing or expenses schedules. For receivables, payables, you can ask for receivables and payable schedule. And for revenue, you can ask for revenue transactions. So these all are part of schedule. It just this changes as per the FS area.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay.
I want to know if there is an asset addition. Sometimes some accountants or if any entries pass, they generally pass in revenue. Like for example, if any repair installation cost is done, for example, so they charge in repairs and maintenance. So how then it can be a variance also. It might be a जैसे कि अगर आपने repairs maintenance में if it has been transferred then as per the accounting standard which we say it needs to be capitalized in the fixed
Right.
assets.
Right.
Then then the fixed asset register which in which amount needs to be increased for such asset which
Right.
have not been increased. Then it needs to be changes. Then it will be disclosed in. I think you were telling in the invoice we will be telling that discrepancies or where.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
मेरा ये क्वेश्चन है कि अगर ये डिस्क्रिपेंसी निकली जैसे एक्सपेंसेस की कि जो कैपिटलाइज होना था वो कैपिटलाइज नहीं हुआ तो देन in this sheet that you mentioned in the presentation so
Yeah.
no next sheet addition deletion which we were talking about I think
Additions are
as
here
per
only.
as per the invoice we will be telling that no, in the variance if we identify that while
No,
doing the
in
audit.
case of like any such variance, like you said that if there is a variance, so firstly, we will be getting that variance in the lead sheet only.
Okay,
Right.
lead sheet only.
And
Okay.
if there is any such variance and they haven't capitalized it, so we can simply ask for the reason that why haven't they capitalized it. Maybe like it is the policy, or like if it's a small firm or big firm, so the laws and regulations may be different for them. So we can
Okay.
simply ask for the variance, like why they are doing this. And if there is no clarity, then we can simply ask them to change this and capitalize that repair and maintenance.
Okay. Okay.
Right. We will get that in the lead sheet only, whether there is any variance or not. This test of details is basically because there is no such invoice. Like we will not be like checking any specifically repair or maintenance here. We'll be checking that if they have purchased that asset or sold that asset or not.
Yes.
Can you tell me adjacent to this client unit and year-end, there's this material performance materiality and this SCD given. So
Right.
this, as this is usually the this is something which we have to decide as per our rationality, like it is like 80% of something or 10% of something that way, or this is every time each to its own account.
So basically materiality, performance materiality and CT, which is sad also. So these all things are being discussed right at the planning stage. So these figures are taken from there. Like what usually happens is when you are preparing and when the audit starts, so based on the previous year and based on the risk of the client and maybe like this year COVID, so this changed the percentage of materiality for most of the clients, like materiality percentage to take, because for some, for example, for like Lenskart, and I gave the example of Lenskart, these shops are closed for such a long period, right? So obviously the risk of their shutting down increases because no customer was going there. So these materiality figures are already discussed and documented in the planning stage. So you take those amount directly from the planning stage only. You need not to recalculate it separately for every FS area. There is one common materiality that you have to use everywhere while testing.
Okay, so this amount remains same for all the basic like financial transactions, financial.
Right. Yeah, remains same for all the financial statement areas. Because how materiality is calculated?
Like
Maybe
PT,
like,
materiality, inventory materiality, everything.
yeah, they all are same. So it is already being discussed during the planning only.
Okay.
Like what would be the materiality, what would be the performance materiality, what would be the CT, which is clearly trivial. So materiality is like, you know what is materiality, PM,
Yeah.
SAT.
Yeah. SAD, I don't know.
So it is basically what we call, we can also call it clearly trivial, which is transaction based. Key, rather than just because materiality is about complete, just a second, sorry. Yeah, so materiality is regarding the complete financial statement, performance materiality, we all know. But when we are checking it on the transaction basis, then we go to CT, clearly trivial, that if any amount is greater than this, then we are going to query regarding that. Materiality is basically complete firm based. Performance materiality, you know that if all the CTs combined together are above performance materiality, then we are going to discuss that with the client. So SAT is basically 5%, 4%, 3% of materiality, and we check it on the and we compare the transaction variances with SAT or clearly trivial.
And we compare
Transaction based variances.
Okay.
Right. So SAT is basically summary of audit differences, or in some forms we can also call it CT. That is clearly trivial.
Okay.
Right. Moving on to payroll. So this is the last testing that we will be performing. So again, at the top, it's just basic documentation. Then we clearly mentioned the procedures. So since we will be doing multiple procedures here, so we have used the pointers. So firstly, going to the objective, it is to ensure employee exists and agree the payroll amount to supporting documents. So what procedures we will be performing, we have mentioned them. Obtain detailed listing of payroll reports and perform procedures to test reliability of report provided. Okay, and then we will take out samples from the report and perform the following. Agree existence of employees by reconciling to agreement and agree the balances of payroll report to salary slip. And secondly, agree the salary paid to bank statements as well. Right. So we have received the IPA report. It will include like the month salary was paid, employee name, what is their gross salary, if they have paid any bonuses or not, if any tax is deducted, and then we'll get the net pay. So this is all IP based information. So you can update it as per what is being provided. Then here comes the auditing work, which is as per bank statement and as per salary slip. We'll add the bank statement to the software and will give its reference that yes, this bank statement is stored here and you can get an access of it easily. Again, for salary slip, we'll add a reference for that. For bank statement, what we will do, we'll see on what date it was being paid and what amount it is being paid, and then we can simply subtract that balance as per bank statement to what is being paid. If there is any big variance or something, then we can simply ask the client that this is the amount that should have been paid as per payroll report, but this is the amount that has been deducted. So we can query regarding this. Moving on to salary slip, we all are working, so we all get our salary slip. So similarly, we can ask for the salary slip of the employees and can check what, and you can see like even in your salary, your gross pay and bonus paid, what is the tax deducted, and everything is mentioned specifically. So we will add those all amounts. We'll mention the net pay and we will subtract this net pay from what is mentioned in the IPE payroll report. Right? And then we'll calculate the variance, which is net pay as per salary slip minus net pay as per their payroll report. If there is some variance, then we will add a movement reason for that. And if there is no variance, then it's absolutely fine. Right? And moving on to conclusion, hence based on the testing performed, payroll is correctly disclosing financial statement. Conclusion, usually the language of conclusion always remains the same, it's just the FS area changes. Okay.
Actually, I have a point.
In layman language, basically the payroll as per the management given and the amount actually paid in the through the bank statement. So this is how you'll reconcile the amount
Right.
actually provided by this IP is the management amount and the bank statement is the amount they've actually paid. So that's how we'll reconcile, right?
Right. We'll calculate the variance that as per payroll report, they are saying that we'll be paying, for example, 20,000 salary, right? So
Right.
whether only that much salary is being transferred to the bank or not.
But
And
the
as per
salary
salary,
slip and just one second, just one. As per payroll report and salary slip, these are the different. Actually, the payroll report and the salary slip is the same thing. So why is it bifurcated into two things?
no, payroll report is different. Like payroll report is basically like they rather than providing all the salary slips, they what client do, they provide you a complete listing of what is being paid during the year, and what we call it a payroll report, and you can also call it a payroll schedule, like discussed previously. And this salary slip are another documentation proof, because payroll report is in the Excel form, anyone can edit it, right? But salary slip is what the HR team and the HR of the company provides to them. So this will give us the exact figure that this is being paid, and this is what they are disclosing in the payroll report, because payroll report are usually in Excel, so anyone can edit it. So
Okay.
that is why, just as another testing, we compare those amount to salary slips.
But the most important thing, like if two things have to be done, then it is salary slip versus the bank statement, right?
No, it will be payroll report with the bank statement. If you have to do like only one,
Okay.
Uh,
right? It's just an additional testing that you perform.
Bigger document is which one? Salary slip is a major document or the payroll report is the major document?
A client will provide you payroll report, but salary slip is usually taken as a supporting document.
Okay.
Tushar, if we can
Yes.
see on the first point of the procedure performed, it was mentioned that obtain detailed listing of payroll reports and perform procedures to test reliability of report provided. So what
Right.
does it mean, perform procedure to test reliability of provide?
Yeah. So basically, we check that again. We test two things. First is when like we'll do the completeness testing of the payroll report. You remember I showed you completeness testing here,
And TP,
here, right?
yeah, TOT,
So again, we will do that reliability testing, that if if the payroll report matches to trial balance, then we can rely on that report that yes, they must have provided us the complete payroll report.
Okay.
Right.
Oh,
Agreed
so
to the
basically the path here is if you have to do that, if you have to explain the testing of payroll, it's that payroll report is provided by the client, and we check the salary slips as the supporting document, which should reconcile with the payroll report, and the salary slip payment should be as per the bank statement payment should be as per the salary slip payment.
Right. As per the salary slip, or like, we usually see the payroll. We whenever I ask a client that we need payroll report, so they will provide us a complete listing of each employee name, like what is being paid to each employer, right? Rather than providing a salary slip of each and every employee. So this usually salary slip part comes on the basis of samples, because like right now if we are doing payroll testing of 20 employees, then it's fine. But a company like Reliance that has like more than 50,000 employees, so you cannot do payroll testing of each and everyone, right? So you take out samples, and in that case, then you ask for salary slip as a supporting document, that yes, for these employees, only this much salary is paid as per the HR, and this much salary is in the payroll report. Because payroll report will be the basic IPE that client will provide to us.
Okay.
That is why we will be comparing this payroll report to trial balance, not the salary slip amounts to trial balance.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so talking about the documentation here. So we use the heading, we gave the reference of salary slip and bank statement, that where they are stored. And we will also document those in the software used. Then we use the formula to calculate the variance And again, just for your reference, for example, in this case, we haven't received bank statements yet. So we will simply just highlight this area and we'll simply add a comment that this has been requested but not yet received, or this hasn't been requested yet. So whatever the update is. Then document IP in the workbook and link. Again, payroll reports are usually received in the Excel form. So you can simply link those amounts to that payroll report like discussed previously. And in the end, it's just conclusion, which is basic documentation. Going to payroll report 2, where we'll be testing. You can see the objective to ensure all new joiners are included and leavers are excluded from payroll. So again, at the top, just again, basic documentation, talking about objective we have discussed, then work performed, request the joiner or leaver report and agree to the agreement that when they should have left and when they should have joined, and then agree the payroll start and end month to the schedule. So here, this payroll client schedule is our main IPE. We'll mention what is the employee name and what is the start and end date, right? Then as per joiner and leaver agreement, what was the agreement type, whether it's a contract or whether the employee was on contract basis or permanent basis, and what is their start and date and end date as per agreement. If it matches, then perfect. And what will be the auditing work here? We'll check the start and last date agrees, that whether the date as per the schedule provided agrees to the date as per the agreement, and then the payroll start and end month agrees to the agreement or not. So how, like we all know about the notice period, right? So if it's a 2-month notice period, then the last payment should have been made after 2 months. That's it. So we're gonna check that and we'll add one like these. You can add these tick marks, or you can simply mention whether it agrees or not, yes or no. Then if there is any variance or like something does not match, you can add a comment here. That's it. And then we comes to conclusion, which is hence based on testing performed, payroll is correctly disclosed in financial statement. If we talk about the documentation here, first is basic documentation, then is procedures and objectives like discussed. Then we document the IP, which is the client schedule here. Then, sorry, the arrow is a bit low here. So we'll document supporting document, which is the agreement here. Agreements are our supporting document. So we will document in the file and we'll give its reference. Then we use the headings and subheadings. Then we added comment if something does not match. And in the end, it's just conclusion, which is basic documentation. And that was it. Any question that you have?
So first of all, thank you so much. Really nice session, and Uma, Shiraz, so many guys, all of you participated so nicely. Even if I took out your lunch time and still, you were though hungry, but still participated so nicely. That shows how sincere you guys are. So sir, I have a very small doubt. Can you go back to that slide where we were showing the exchange rates and the currency?
Yeah.
So many times people have confusion. So when there is exchange rate taken by the client of some other date, or they have used from some other reference place, suppose they have taken from onda.com, and I'm using BDO or KPMG guided reference, or client would have taken on the recording date, and I am taking on the document date, which ideally it should be. So there are differences. But suppose I had 100 transactions during there, I took 5 examples or 5 samples, and out of those 5, one has such difference of say 1,000 pound or say 10,000 rupees. So how do we conclude on that, and how do we show that in the work paper?
Right. So in that case, firstly, we will check that whether that variance is above SAD or clearly trivial. If it is not above, then it's absolutely fine. And if it's above that and we have done it on sample basis, then what we do, we distribute that variance among the total listing. So if you want, I can show you it with the help of an example.
Have others understood the doubt? Otherwise, we can elaborate. Yeah, we are just talking about the extrapolation of any error found
Yes,
in the
extrapolation.
sample.
Sorry, just a second. Yeah. So basically, for example, let's take the total of schedule is 1 lakh.
Yeah.
and the variance that we got is 5,000. Okay. Total number of items 1,200. Samples taken 5. And let's just simply suppose that this variance is above CT. Okay, so what we will do, this is the variance that we are getting in 5 samples. So what we will do, we will extrapolate this variance among those all 100 transactions and check that whether it's above materiality or performance materiality or even above the CT or not. So we can simply use a formula which is variance, okay, into number of items divided by samples taken. So this will give us the total, this will give us the total variance on after the extrapolation, that this is the total variance that you might be getting if you will check the variance of all the items. So if it's above CT, then we can simply go to client and we can simply mention that we are getting a high variance and there is something wrong, and we can get on a call with them and discuss. But if it is less than the CT, then we can simply ignore this. So what the Hardik's query was that if we have taken the samples and if we are having some variances there, then how we will check that whether this variance, if checked for the total number of items in the schedule, then whether it is material variance or not. So what we did, we take the total of schedule, which is like 1 lakh. The variance that we were getting for 5 samples was 5,000, and total number of items in that schedule was like total number of transactions or total number of listing there was 100. So what we did, we took the variance, we multiplied it with the number of items and simply divided it by the samples taken to see what would be the variance if those all 100 items were tested. So we got this amount, that this would be the variance. If this amount is above CT, then we will go to client to discuss this, that this is above our clearly trivial or our summary of audit misstatement, and we need to do something for this, otherwise something is fishy here. But if this amount is less than clearly trivial, then we can simply ignore this.
So Tushar, I have seen few books for also use some percentage. Suppose the exchange gain difference or the exchange gain and loss difference is less than 1% of the transaction, then they ignore it. Even if it is say above CT or something, is that something like that?
Yeah, like that depends upon like area to area, that how much risky area is that, and obviously depends upon the how big the client is and in what industry it is dealing. So there is no hard and fast rule, but they might be following that, they might not be following that. That totally depends upon what partner wants.
Cool. That's awesome. So in nutshell, if we try to say Tushar's session, which is very rich in content and the context was very relevant to the people, which dealt with multiple financial statement areas and almost all the balance sheet and P&L items. Of course, there will be so many other procedures for which he would not have presented the work paper, but this was just to give you guys a flavor. Suppose performing SAP analytical procedures, we did not show any work paper. Performing test of control or sampling of the test of control, we did not show any work paper. But generally speaking, when you are testing test of detail or when you are verifying common work areas, most of these concepts will apply. Mutatis, same as how he mentioned. So great session, Tushar. Anyone has got any feedback or they want to add? Because suppose it's EY, they also add from and to, as a where is this number coming from and where is this number being traced to, as additional responsibility for the work paper. So if anyone wants to add anything which me and Tushar would have missed, we would love to know.
Hardik, even I mentioned this point, like mention date and client contact name from whom the IP was received.
Yeah, what they do is, suppose they're verifying some number of cash, they will say this is coming from trial balance, so that they will write in the left hand side, and it is going to cash flow statement, so they will write it on the right hand side. So it is also mentioned on the left side, they will say coming from, and right hand side where it is traced to. So that not all the big four are following that. EY does that.
So obviously, like I said, like they might ask you to add 1 or 2 things, and they might ask you to remove 1 or 2 things from this.
Yeah.
So that's the case. So yeah, guys, if anyone has point, like I'll add this to the presentation and we'll share it with Hardik so that he can share it with you.
I hope everything is covered. No point is missed because somewhere I have raised a hand and the same question asked by Simrit. So I didn't ask the same question again. It's a good session, Tusharji. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that all your queries were resolved when I was giving response to him as well.
Great
Yeah.
applause for you, Tushar. Great applause. And everyone for their good participation. Very good.
Yeah, absolutely. Like at the starting, I was thinking that no one is participating, but if they are participating, so I believe this session was fine.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
And guys, if you have anything, any question or anything later as well, you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn as well. So, thank you so much, guys.
Sir.
Thank you, Hardik.